Welcome to Godot Unscripted, a podcast on the Godot ecosystem. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are. I'm pretty sure that's from somewhere else, but that doesn't matter. Today, on our beautiful podcast, we have the one and only Elli from Sextant Studios, creator of Flocking Hell. Elli has a history in designing board games and being on podcasts as well, and also games, a little bit of everything. Ellie, how the hell are you?
Hello, Danielle. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this.
Same here, same here. And there's a lot to talk about. But I always like to start this by asking, when did you first realize you were interested in games?
When I became a sentient person, more or less, I've been gaming since forever, and
Mm.
I think I was 6 years old when my mom made the mistake of buying me the red box for Dungeons and Dragons, and I remember sitting in my grandmother's kitchen and reading through the rulebook for both the players and the dungeon master. So for me, playing games has been a constant of my life since I was a child, whether it was Dungeons and Dragons or Talisman or Magic the Gathering. I made these small games with my friends. We had this game where you built your character, which was a back then it was WWF, now it's WWE, but your character is a wrestler, and we rolled dice
Mm.
and we did these wrestling matches between us. So for me, games have always been there.
Nice. I didn't know the WWE actually had like a tabletop RPG.
Oh, we made one. I meant that a friend of mine and me, we
Oh, you made
made a
it.
game based on, it was really a
That's
thinly
so cool.
veiled, it was a thinly veiled Dungeons and Dragons battle system, but we skinned it with WWF wrestlers.
You mean you improved upon it?
Oh yeah, I'm a big believer in modding whatever it is you're playing. And for me, that's one of the joys with tabletop role-playing games and with board games that every group has their own rules. And even if you think about classic
Mm.
games like Monopoly, I don't think any two families play Monopoly the same way. I was discussing this with a friend of mine a few weeks ago that very few people actually read the rulebook for Monopoly. Monopoly is sort of an oral tradition at this point,
Yeah.
and many of the oral traditions are not very good, but they're oral traditions nevertheless. So for me, one of the big joys about games is being able to modify them and customize them to your taste, to your group, to whatever you feel like doing today.
I like how you put that, modifying traditions. And you said this earlier, but I just want to bring it that your mom made a mistake when she did this. My parents say the same thing, right? Because I'm now working in the games industry, and they always say it was a mistake to get you that game system all the way back then.
Yeah, and I think I'm not the only gaming nerd who had like the tension with my parents was not about smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol or doing drugs. The tension with my parents was about games and a lot of fights about Magic the Gathering and my dad, I think to this day, my dad despises StarCraft. He calls StarCraft the Green Man game. I don't know why. StarCraft doesn't have any Green Man in it, but that's like my dad calls it the Green Man game and he hates it because I spent so much time playing StarCraft. I think for years, whenever he went into my room, that was the game on the monitor. So I think it's sort of like a common nerd existence from my generation, right? That our
Yeah.
parents just didn't understand games, and that was our teenage rebellion.
even yeah, I think it was definitely a rebellion. My parents understood. They just didn't approve of it, right? As you say, like there's worse things, cigarettes, drugs, or whatever else it may be. But it was like, no, maybe, maybe it's better if my kid smokes. I'm exaggerating, but that's how it felt sometimes.
The good news
uh,
is, if a teenager, like the teenage rebellion is to smoke, then they grow up and maybe they stop smoking. But if their teenage rebellion is StarCraft, they're hooked for life. So I can see the frustration on
true,
the parent
true.
side.
So you mentioned you were already designing, modifying, and creating tabletop RPGs and board games at an early age. Could you expand on this a little bit? How it evolved throughout the years?
Certainly, and one of the one of the common threads on Reddit and Blue Sky and social media, people are saying that they're an aspiring game designer or they're a wannabe game designer. In my mind, as soon as you start designing a game, you're a game designer. And it's a very easy title to acquire, but also very hard because starting to design a game, not trivial, requires lots of work. So, in my mind, I've been a game designer since I was a kid, just because I was making games. And I think that the three biggest memories are Dungeons and Dragons, such a wonderful sandbox for creativity. And
Hmm.
I was saying how Monopoly is an oral tradition. I think in many ways Dungeons and Dragons is also an oral tradition where most people are taught the game by a friend, usually the dungeon master. So there's always house rules and tweaks and changes. So for the campaign I ran as a kid, we just had our own set of rules that were not canonical, like first edition Dungeons and Dragons. So that's one great example. And another one is a board game I made, I think, in my teenage years. And
Hmm.
interestingly enough, I still have the prototype somewhere. It was an overly ambitious, like crazy ambitious game about how you're playing one of four alien races who are trying to manipulate world history to bring Earth
Hmm.
to whichever desired outcome that they wanted Earth to reach. And another common trope, people's first design is way too complicated. And this was very much the case. You were playing over the world map, and you could travel back in time, and there was these conflict cards, you could build time machines, you would send agents, and then as you would complete missions, the map would change. So, like, if you
Oof.
stopped World War II, then suddenly Eastern Europe and Western Europe combined into one territory called Europe. So the whole thing was over the top crazy. I managed to finagle three of my friends to playtest it once,
Yeah,
and it wasn't a complete disaster, you know. We managed to finish three or four turns, which
that's
in
pretty
my
good.
mind, yeah, that's a good start, you know. If you write some stuff and you cut some cardboard and you can finish four turns, that's already a triumph in my book. And then of course there were video games. And the reason I picked up programming was because I wanted to make video games. And the first programming language I learned was Turbo Pascal, which
Hmm.
I don't know if you know it. I don't know if the audience knows it. It is
I
a
know of the language. I
of
don't
the
know
language.
it. Yeah.
Good answer. It's a very pedagogical language. So back in the 80s and the 90s, it was very much in fashion to have programming languages that are used to teach proper programming. So Pascal is a very well-defined, hard-typed programming language that was designed for academia to teach people how to program. And
Mm.
nowadays, we just teach people how to program with real production programming languages. So it was a very weird habit back then. So yeah, I picked up Pascal. One of the first things I programmed was a blackjack game, and I've programmed a lot of tiny games over the years, most of which are sadly lost to time.
No.
But such is code, you know, such is code with people that don't know about Git. Um,
Oh no.
I don't think any of them were worth preserving. It's fine. But yeah, lots of these small video games over the years that also happened.
That's so cool. And at what age was this that you learned Pascal and started promoting gambling? No, I'm kidding.
When so I started learning programming when I was 6, and
What?
I
Oh my
think the
god,
blackjack
crazy.
thing was when I was 7 or 8.
What? Oh my, that's even more insane. That's crazy. So, in parallel, you were going towards video games and board games. And you mentioned this board game that you did as a teenager that was overly complicated. Did other board games come after that, or other video games?
Nothing like there's always. It's interesting that you ask this now because we're moving to a new house, and
Hmm.
part of the decision of moving is to get rid of some crap.
Yeah.
And as we're talking, I'm staring at a pile of about 50 recordable DVDs, which I accumulated over the years. And one of my missions right now is to go through these DVDs. Like, the goal is to put them in the trash, but before I do, I'm going through all of them to see what's actually on them. And I'm hoping to find some of my old designs because, back in the day, we didn't have cloud, we didn't have the internet, everything was stored locally. So
Mhm.
I have all these folders with ideas for games, and one of my biggest passions have been card games. I was a huge Magic the Gathering fan back in the day, and then it extended into other games like Middle Earth the Wizards, the Babylon 5 collectible card game, the Netrunner
Mm.
card game. So I have probably at least 4 or 5 different designs for card games sitting in Excel sheets, maybe on these DVD-Rs. I don't know. So lots of ideas. Nothing was finished. And I think that's the biggest hurdle people face, just finish a thing. All of them were very
Oh yeah.
ambitious and big and exciting, but none of them were done. And it took a long while until I actually finished a game.
Yeah. Was that World Breakers or which one was it?
Yeah, the first game I finished was Wall Breakers, and Wall Breakers is a card game because card games are the best. And
Yes, plus one.
yes, and I started working on Wall Breakers in 2021, and then I crowdfunded the game using Kickstarter, and the game was released in 2022. So Wall Breakers is a two-player card game which is set in 13th century Mongolia. It belongs to the alternate history genre, and thematically, the starting point was what if the Black Plague didn't happen? What if Western Asia didn't collapse at the end of the 13th century, beginning of 14th century, and all of these conquests that the Mongols began, all of the cultural influence that Japan and China had, what if they just continued instead of being interrupted and then supplanted by the Renaissance 200 years later?
Mm.
And the whole game sort of evolved from that premise, and it's a very like zany combination of real world figures like Marco Polo or Kutulun, who was a bona fide Mongolian warrior princess, and this fantastic element of these like magical rocks called Mythium that people can use for all sorts of stuff. So yeah, World Breakers was published in 2022, and then I crowdfunded an expansion in 2023. That's the Indigo Sisterhood, and that was released last year. So I'm pretty proud of publishing both a board game and an expansion for that board game.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like when I saw it, I'm like, oh, damn, this is a. I don't know. It seems to me that publishing a board game is so much more impressive than a video game somehow because it's more tangible, more physical.
Yeah, and the big problem with making games is that it is the most fun job you can ever have in the universe. So once you do it once, it's very addictive. And I really enjoy like making World Breakers was a dream come true, and there was so much learning involved in making a physical product because you hire freelancers to draw the illustrations, you hire a graphics designer for the card design, and then you need someone to help with the Kickstarter campaign, and you can do all these things yourself, but I had the privilege of like having some loose change to be able to hire these people. And then once the design is done, you have these PDFs, but PDFs are not what players are going to play with, right? They need actual physical cards. And
Yeah.
taking these PDFs and making them into a real box with cardboard, which is produced in China, and then getting it from China into the rest of the world, that is also sort of like a game as well. A very stressing game and very expensive, but a game nevertheless. So I really enjoyed the self-publishing journey of figuring out how to print the game, how to distribute the game, how to talk to retailers so that they sell the game in their stores. There's over 60
Mm.
stores that sell World Breakers. So it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah, it sounds super impressive. Can I ask, where did you get the funding from, or how did this work with the funding?
I started with my own seed fund, and
Mm,
again, just privileged to have some loose change running around. And then the crowdfunding raised $30,000, which sort of exactly covered it.
nice.
Like, I didn't make any money on Wall Breakers, but I sort of think of it as my passion project. So, like, oftentimes people ask, "Oh, how much did you pay yourself?" I didn't pay myself anything. This was not a profitable endeavor. This was a crazy quest that started 30 years ago with like baby Ellie and has now finally been completed. And at least I didn't lose any money on it, which for me, it's not much, but it's a huge success in my mind.
It,
And
yes, it's a huge success on paper as well because, like, right, the majority of board games and people actually working on this fare far, far worse. So, of course, you weren't top 0.1%, but top 1%, maybe, I would say.
yes, I think so. Just get, to all the designers out there, just getting anything out the door already puts you at the top 1%, I think. Like there's an incredible amount of people who talk about making games and don't make games. And it's the same for any creative endeavor. So many people talk about their novel or about the music they're gonna make. And creative pursuits are difficult and painful and hard. Anything you put out there for other people to consume is already a huge success in my mind. And being able to put wall breakers out there and the fact that I didn't lose any money on it, like to me that's great. And people still buy it. It's still very cool. Every few days I get an email from Amazon or someone on my online store. Uh, so people still buy the game, people still play the game. I get photos of people playing it with their kids. So it's all very satisfying.
Nice. And you were also in a podcast after this, right? The Who, What, Why game design podcast.
Yeah, I interviewed for a bunch of podcasts, and the one you mentioned is very focused on design. So
Mm,
I think he has, I forgot the name of the interviewer, but I think he has hundreds of episodes. He's been doing podcasts before podcasts were cool. So he has hundreds of episodes interviewing designers from many different types of games. And it was really a pleasure to be able to talk to him about the design process for Wallbreakers and how the game came to be.
nice. Now I want to talk about maybe not Flocking Hill first, but how you decided for Godot, when you started using it, or when did you hear about it?
Godot has been on my radar for several years now. So I used to play Android Netrunner, a card game, and one of
Mm,
the Netrunner players introduced me to Godot when it was still Godot 3. And he's been using it for his own game. And at the time I was saying, okay, if I make a game, that's the framework, like that's the engine I will use. And the decision to use Godot is 100% political in my mind. Godot is open source,
mm,
and I'm a very firm believer in the open source movement. And whenever an open source tool exists that I can use instead of a commercial tool, I will go with the open source tool. Now, there is an asterisk there because there's many open source substitutions for like um, for published for paid software, which are not very good. And
mm.
like I would prefer not to harm my productivity just to insist on open source. I would not use open source no matter the cost. But I think Godot belongs to a respectable family of open source tools that are very much equal and in some ways surpass their paid alternatives. Especially with Godot 4. Like I've again, it's been on my radar since Godot 3, but the jump to Godot 4 was just so huge that at that point it was the easiest decision ever. The combination of open source and such a powerful, versatile, and well-supported engine, super easy decision.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. And then with the recent updates, I mean, if you saw it just today or yesterday, I think it was, 4.5, well, at least the beta. Things are just escalating so quickly. It's incredible to see.
I agree, and I think that the past couple of years have been like several companies really took off their masks there and have shown us their
Hmm.
true skins. I won't name names, but I imagine the listeners know what I'm talking about, where at least two companies that seem to be very developer facing suddenly changed their licenses in ways that were destructive and really shattered the trust that I, as a developer, and I think many other developers have of these companies. And it really strengthened my conviction that when it comes to game design, you really should use open source when you can. And there's so many great open source tools out there, um, that for me, again, super easy decision.
Then I want to ask about Flocking Hill. Where did the idea come from? I saw that one of the inspirations was Defense of the Oasis, but was this the first thing that came to your mind, or did you like explore for a while which projects you wanted to make?
The starting point for Flocking Hell was Marvel Snap, and
What? Okay.
I know, bear with me. So I mentioned that I love card games, really, the best card of game, the best kind of game, and really appreciated Marvel Snap because it took this genre of card games and packaged it in a way that was extremely accessible. And I think the biggest innovation of Marvel Snap is creating an enticing game that can be finished within a few minutes. And
Hmm.
when I started gaming, I was a kid, and like when I was a teenager and during college, I could play for 30, 40, 50 hours a week. Um, like I remember when Baldur's Gate 2 came out, I skipped school for 2 weeks to play Baldur's Gate. And
Nice.
like I would go to like I had to go in so that they see that I'm there, but there was like a hole in the fence surrounding the school. So I would go in, say hi to my teachers, 15 minutes later go out, walk home for 45 minutes and play Baldur's Gate 2. But now in my 40s, like I have a job, I have a family, I like my kids, they're pretty cool. So I can no longer play
Hmm.
for 50 hours a week as much as I would want to.
No.
I know, tragic. So any game that takes, like any deep game, any game that takes compelling, interesting decisions and packages them in a way that I can access it, for me is really interesting from a design perspective and fun as a player. And I feel that Marvel Snap did a great job with that.
Hmm.
So for me, the big innovation of Marvel Snap was packaging an interesting game into 3 4 minutes. And I really started thinking along these lines. So I had a really interesting idea for a Marvel Snap like game where you build your deck, you play for 3 4 minutes, but that it's a cooperative game. And if you're the listeners are familiar with Spirit Island is a board game where you're playing on an island that is being invaded by practically white people. It's being colonized by these different European kingdoms, and your job as the mystical spirits of the island is to stop the invaders. So my first game idea was to take the theme of defending your island from invaders and pack it up as a Marvel Snap like experience. And I started working on that, and it was way too ambitious. Like it has multiplayer, and it might have some sort of collectability element to it. And how do you fund
Hmm.
this game? How do you monetize it? So I had another game idea that again follows the route of having deep, short play experiences. But that one was a single player game where you play over a map and you explore the map and you start finding these different buildings and playing cards. Um, Very conceptually similar to what Flocking Hell became, but the gameplay loop was somewhat different. And I just felt that designing and iterating on the gameplay loop is gonna take too much time. Which
Hmm.
brings us to an important design restriction. I wanted to finish the damn thing. I wanted to make the game and finish it and put it on Steam. And I wanted like to sell 1,000 copies, which is a lot. But step one, finish the game. Step two, put it on Steam. Step three, hopefully someone's buy it. But in
Hmm.
order to finish it, I knew I had to scope very aggressively. And that's where the element of Defense of the Oasis came into play. Defense of the Oasis is a classic strategy game from 2004. It received amazing reviews back in the day, and you can still find the designer postmortem on what was Gamma Sutra. So if you look for Gamma Sutra Defense of the Oasis, there's a great designer diary, and sort of disappeared afterwards. But great game, very impactful. People still remember it 20 years later. So I decided to sort of cheat and adopt a big part of the Defense of the Oasis gameplay loop and just dress my own game on top of it. So anyone who played Defense of the Oasis and looks at Flocking Hell immediately sees that they share a lot of similarities. Flocking Hell is different in many ways, but just being able to take the gameplay loop from an existing game made my life so much easier.
Sounds incredible how you went through this process in a. Well, I imagine it was messier in real life, but how you managed to recount it in such an organized way. I'm even more impressed that you mentioned you have a family and you managed to do the board game and develop this game at the same time. How do you balance that?
Poorly.
Oh no.
No, I'm joking. Um, I think that going through Wall Breakers was an important experience because it was deeply emotional for me to work on Wall Breakers. I'm completely serious when I'm saying that this is a quest that started 30 years ago when I was a kid, and it was just laden with so many feelings, and it became overwhelming and all encompassing at some points, which was very unhealthy. So going through Wallbreakers and dedicating that year to making the game and seeing how deeply invested I am in making the game. And I've worked in jobs before. I ran businesses before. I have two businesses before the board gaming business. I did a PhD. All of these things were really enticing and I was deeply invested in them, but completely different scale when it comes to the board game development. Just so much deeper. So going through
Hmm.
Wall Breakers really taught me that I have this side of me that just becomes 1,000,000% invested in making the game, which is just unhealthy for myself and for my surroundings. And with Flocking Hell, I mentioned that the goal was to design the game and publish it, and that meant very aggressive scoping. Like when I started working on Flocking Hell, it was easily 5 times the game that it is now. It had a
Hmm.
storyline, and you made all these decisions about where you want to go with the story, and you had these different technology paths that you could unlock. So there was a whole skill tree that you could have gone through, and I very quickly decided that I really have to give up on many of these things. And they're not going away forever. Maybe there's going to be a DLC, maybe there's going to be an expansion, maybe there's going to be another game that has these elements. But for the purpose of finishing a game within a reasonable time while keeping myself sane and making sure my wife and my partner still love me, um, I really had to scope very aggressively.
I wanted to ask you at the same time, how was it for you working in Godot as an engine for Flocking Hell? Like, what were things you liked? What were problems you encountered? How was the whole experience from start to finish?
It was so easy. It was so
What?
it was so comfortable and easy that I'm like, why didn't they do this sooner? There was starting a new thing is always big and scary, and going into a game engine, like the last time I used a game engine was the Serious engine, which was used to make the video game Serious Sam, and
Oh,
I think this was like 27 years ago. and I believe it was written in C or C++. And like engine design has progressed quite a bit since the late 90s. So I think I had this fear of like, oh, I have to go into the serious engine again. But Godot is just so easy to get into. And I made a decision to use GDScript because I just wanted to get something out there fast. I'm a one-person team. I wanted to finish something fast. I wanted to playtest and be able to iterate quickly. So starting with Godot, starting with GDScript, as someone who already knows Python, it was just so easy and seamless. And I did a couple of tutorials. I think maybe 2 or 3 hours of tutorials, and that was it. I was ready to go. Now, to be clear, I made lots of mistakes along the way because when you start a new project, when you start a new programming language, you always behave as if you're using some other programming language, which is not the one you're using. And some of these things I fixed them. Like some of these things I later went back and did some refactoring, and some of them I didn't. Some of the Flocking Hill code base, not the best. Um, but I think that was a big easy part for me. Some of the challenges, it's hard to figure them out, and like it's hard to think of challenges because everything was very straightforward. I will say that since Flocking Hell is graphically simple, it's a 2D pixel art game, which are relatively straightforward to make. I didn't have a chance to brush into some of the more complicated parts of the engine. I have no 3D, I have no collision detection. So these
Mm.
things didn't really didn't really need them. So I think these are places that might have been more difficult to navigate. But given that Flocking Hell is again a simple game in that regard, I can't really think of any big like roadblocks along the way. It was just a very easy and fun and simple experience.
Incredible. I'm so impressed. I don't know what to say. But I'm also at the same time happy to hear that. And well, a lot of it is also due to your experience as a game designer and how aggressively you scoped it down.
I think if listeners are taking one message away from this interview is that just scope is the most important aspect of game design. To get your game done and to keep yourself sane, I always say that your biggest resource as a game designer is your mental health. And as long as you're sane and you can keep going, then you're going to make your game. But if you burn out or if you get frustrated to such a degree that you just can't keep working on it, then the game is not going to be done. So, in my mind, the best way to manage your mental health is just give up on some things. And, again, you just put them in a notebook or in a Google Doc or in a spreadsheet, and you're going to get to them later with another game or with an expansion. But for the game you're working on right now, just make sure it gets out there.
I like that a lot. Right? Your best or your biggest resource is your mental health. So I saw that it's you and Anna, and I wanted to ask, when did you decide to found the studio? Who is Anna? Yeah, I'm interested to hear a little bit about that.
So Anna is my wife and partner in crime. She's been an incredible supporter and ally since I started working on Wall Breakers, and has been stuck with a whole bunch of tasks that she didn't expect to be to be taken care of when when she agreed to this. And she's been helping with everything. Like she's been playtesting the earliest and crunchiest prototypes, and she's been reviewing art. She's been helping with music. She's been doing marketing work. So a lot of the outreach to YouTubers. Anna is the one that we have a CRM, but Anna is the one who's running the CRM and
Mm.
emailing everyone and following up with YouTubers. For Flocking Hell, we ended up emailing about 600 people. So Anna is the one
Oh, damn.
we did discovery together, but Anna is the one who ended up managing a lot of the communications. And Sextant Studios. So Sextant Studios was founded. I was working on Wall Breakers, and I made the game. I designed it. There's art and everything. I ran through the crowdfunding campaign. Like I got money from the pledges from funders. I'm making the PDFs for the factory, and I'm sending the PDF for the production of the game to the factory to Longpack, which is a factory in China, and they always come back with notes about things that didn't go well or that they want clarifications on. So I send them the art for the box for wall breakers, and they come back and they ask where's the company logo, because they must have a company logo to publish a game. It's I don't know if like
Oh,
they need to have it
okay.
on the like on the big cardboard box that they use for shipping internationally. It must have a company name or logo on it. Someone has to be responsible of an international shipment. And I'm like, I don't have one. I yeah, I just improvised a really poorly designed logo so I can slap it on the box. And my previous
Mm.
company, I had a life sciences business called Astrolabe, which is a nautical instrument from the third century. And I'm like, okay, I need to find a new company name right now. Let's do Sextant, because sextants are the ones that came after astrolabes. Um, and that's how Sextant Studios came to be. And that's why when you start working on a new business venture, you really should start by thinking about some sort of name for your company so that you don't reach the finish line and need to improvise something in Adobe Illustrator.
But at the same time, I'm impressed. Like throughout this whole podcast, how you've mentioned right the distribution, marketing, not only of the board game, but of course also the video game in general. And I was wondering if you would like to say what your day job or Anna's day job is, or did you like research all this stuff by yourselves and just like wing it?
So Anna she's a researcher and she works in healthcare here in the United States. So this is
Mhm.
very much a side gig for her, which she does very graciously, and I'm deeply appreciative of it. And for me, my day job for the past 4 years has been game design. Um, but there's a really important asterisk there. Back in 2017, I started a life sciences business called Astrolabe Diagnostics that the business helps researchers in biology to analyze their data. So it's a machine learning software as a service business, and um, I'm very fortunate to have sort of recruited a large number of clients who are using the software, and that has been pretty much fueling the rest of my life. So it's really important to say that the game design business, I've been at it full time, but it is not the source of funding. The source of funding is another business, a life sciences business. And I think a lot of people come into game design expecting to become profitable or self-sustaining within a short amount of time, but sadly that's not the case. And while there are huge success stories of people releasing their first games and making millions, these are not even the outliers. These are the outliers for the outliers. I think
Mm.
a much more reasonable course is to aim for sustainability within 5 to 10 years of when you started. And for that 5 to 10 year period, you really should know where you're getting your money from. Like, how are you paying rent? How are you buying groceries? And there's different stories. I'm incredibly lucky to have had another business that I can use to support myself. But talking to
Mm.
other developers, it might be a day job, it might be a spouse, it might be parents. People who live in their parents' house and their parents are happy to support them. Take advantage of it. It's fine. It's allowed. Your parents love you. And work on your gaming business. And yeah, just to recap, working full time as a game designer, but again, the money does not come from the game design.
Yeah, but that's pretty cool, and nonetheless, I still find it impressive that um, you were proactive about this and all these things that you learn. It just you emanate entrepreneurial mindset, which is really cool, right? Somebody who just gets things done. And talking about getting things done, did you also do all the music and art by yourself for the game?
I'll just go back to your previous note about the entrepreneurial state of mind. This is very much a
Yeah.
business, and if any of the listeners want to make a living out of making games, you should think about it as a business first. And this means that it's gonna come with certain requirements. Like you can't make any game you want and expect to sell it and make lots of money. There's a lot of resources out there that talk about different genres, they talk about market, they talk about doing discovery and figuring out what is the players want. It's really important to have that as a starting point, in my opinion. Now, if you're a hobbyist or if you're fine working a day job and you just want to make games on the evenings and nights, you should make whatever the hell you want and go wild and go crazy because you are not financially dependent on your creation. But if your long-term plan is to quit your day job, if your long-term plan is to do this full time, then the responsible thing to do is to think about it from a sustainability perspective. At which point, things like market research, like understanding how YouTube works, how Twitch works, how the Steam algorithm works, how the different festivals and discounts tie into this, how to publish yourself, how to promote yourself on social media and on Reddit, all of these fall under the big umbrella of marketing, and it is crucial to understand how these things work before you write a single line of code or design a single mechanic.
Yeah, I agree completely. You could go even further and say that because it is a business and how products work today in this industry, you wouldn't even settle on a game concept until you know there is an audience for the specific product you want to make, or you create an audience for it, right? But it's as you say, right? This is, if you want to make money, it's a business first. But if you're doing it for fun, do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, and that's also important. Not everything has to make money. Not everything has to be the thing that sustains you and keeps you going. And if you're passionate about a game and you spend a few months to a couple of years making it, or any amount of time you want really, and you put it on Steam and 10 people play it and leave favorable reviews, in my opinion, that's incredible. So if that's the end goal, you should totally go for it. And you really should ignore everything I just said about market and YouTube and all that, because it's just going to be frustrating and going to distract you from your true goal, which is making whichever piece of art you want to make.
Yeah. You heard it here first, folks. Ignore everything they just said.
It's tricky because I'm really big on Reddit. I use Reddit all the time, and there's the indie dev subreddits. There's a couple of them, and they're really like they're great. People there are very helpful and kind, but oftentimes there's some sort of dissonance where someone is asking a question with a certain end goal in mind. Like someone is asking about promotion, they're promoting their game, and people assume that they want to make $1 million, while that person they just want to sell 100 copies. So I think defining your goals and deciding on them before you start setting the goalposts is a big part of actually reaching a destination you're happy with.
So wait, art, music, you did that by
Yes,
yourself?
let's go back to
Going
that.
back to the original
Yeah,
question.
I am not a solo developer on the strictest, purest definition because I did hire people to help me make Flocking Hell. So for Flocking Hell, I designed the game, I wrote all the code, I did a lot of the marketing and promotion. Anna, my wife, did a fair amount as well. But let's talk about the assets. So the music is coming from Simon Daoud. Simon is a Canadian composer. You can find him on Instagram. He is phenomenal. So if you're looking for someone to make music for your video game, I strongly recommend checking out Simon. He's been such a great person to work with, and I love the Flocking Hell music. I have heard the soundtrack about a million times at this point, and whenever I play this the game, I keep the music on because I legit enjoy it. So, strongly recommend Simon. Then for the art, for the pixel art, I used several different resources. The one I would want to highlight is a studio called Lunic Games. That's Lunic. and they are based in Brazil, I believe. In particular,
Mm.
I worked with Lurils and Bruno at Lunic Games. They are responsible for a big chunk of the art and animation in Flocking Hell. And there's a few other contributors. You can find them on the credits for the game. You don't have to buy it, there's a demo. And if you want any more recommendations, please by all means reach out to me. You can find my email everywhere. So if you have any questions, if you're looking for any recommendations, please reach out.
Nice. We only got a little bit of time left. I wanted to ask you about your next game because I saw these hexagon board game or like physical modular prototypes you had on posted on Blue Sky. So what is coming up
So I'm
next?
thinking about three potential games right now, and one of my goals for the coming months is to create three different prototypes and run them through my colleagues, my friends, and see which one sticks. That is not something I did with Flocking Hell. With Flocking Hell, I had a very specific gameplay loop in mind, and also I wanted to finish something in a few months, going back to the goal of just putting something out there. But for my next game, I do want it to be more successful. I want it to have more commercial appeal. And for that, I feel that early prototyping is crucial. So I'm working on three games right
Mm.
now. Two of them use hexes, and one I've been featuring on Blue Sky. It is a city builder that is played again in about 5 minutes, and unlike Flocking Hell, it is not there is no adversary. It's really about building the best city you can within the confines of a handful of turns. And right now, it is very snappy. So you start with like one money, and every turn you get plus one money, and you use these cards to build up your city. I don't know if that's going to be the final form of it, but again, I'm going to prototype it. One of the nice things about Godot and GDScript, very easy to prototype ideas, put it on itch.io, and have some friends play through it and see what they think. Another game I am working on is going back to the idea of a cooperative city builder game. And it's interesting because I already saw a couple of these pop up on Reddit. So I think the zeitgeist might be going into the cooperative city builder genre. Again, it's going to use hexes, it's going to use cards for your different buildings, and the idea is that you're collaborating with an ally on building the best city that you can. That might have an adversarial component. It might be that there is going to be some enemy that is going to attack your city. But again, I'm going to prototype and try and figure it out. And the third game I'm working on is actually going back to my roots a bit and going to Wall Breakers. I want to see if an online version of Wall Breakers has merit. And it's a big question. Card games, like pure card games, are a complicated market, and I would not want to invest too much into it if I have no chance of making a break for it. But it is something I'm thinking about. So three projects, two are city builders, and one is a card game.
Oh my god, that's crazy! I'm super excited to see the pace at which this is developed and when they come out. But from what you described, I'm sure they're like on their way.
I hope so. And the early steps of like the early days of a project are, for me at least, are very emotional. It's a big mix of excitement and frustration because with Flocking Hell right now, I've been releasing patches for Flocking Hell. Like the game was released 3 months ago. I've already released 5 content patches, and I expect to release a few more in the coming months because the game is established, both the design and the code base, and now it is a it is a it is like a very limited canvas because the game is done, but a very comfortable one. So
Hmm.
if I want to release a patch for Flocking Hell and introduce 15 new cards, then I have so many ideas for new cards for Flocking Hell. So it's both comfortable, but the impact is lower. For a new project, it's opposite. The sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want, but everything has a chance to break down or Like every mechanic you introduce might not work the way you think it's gonna work, and players are gonna ruin everything. So it's this fun mix of excitement and frustration of making a new thing.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That's the best thing, honestly. I also love that. Just, I don't know, theory is so much fun, you know?
Yeah, and I'm a big theory crafter. So oftentimes when I start a new game, the first asset is gonna be a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet is going to have some columns and some numbers, and I'm going to play with the numbers like in my mind, and then maybe I'm going to write a Python script that just simulates a gameplay loop very, very primitively and just see that the numbers work. So I'm a very technical, numbers, analytics oriented designer.
Nice. And I think that's a good note to end on. So, before we say goodbye, Elli, please plug in your stuff. Where can we follow you? Where can we support you? Where can we buy your games?
My pleasure. And first of all, thank you again for having me. This has been loads of fun. You can find me on Blue Sky under Sextant Studios, and both of my games are available. So you can buy Wall Breakers if you're in the United States on Amazon. If you're outside of the US, you can buy it on my online store. Just Google Wall Breakers the game. And Flocking Hell is on Steam. So please check it out. There's a demo. There will always be a demo. I think that having a demo for your game is the ethical thing to do. So you can always try Flocking Hell, play the demo, see if you like it, and if you do, please buy the game. And thank you for listening, and please keep supporting this podcast because it's awesome.
Keep supporting indie devs, keep supporting Godot, and thank you as well for saying that. And thank you to everybody who stopped by to listen. This was Godot Unscripted. It's still a topic I battle with personally because really at one point you don't really choose the game you make
Mm-hmm.
if you really like go full into market research, right? I know a lot of people in the industry, since I work as a producer in games as well, and really like directors of publishing, these people right now, the meta, so to speak, as if it were a game, is that you create your own audience. So you create your IP, you create, for example, comics, videos, a universe, like lore, get people invested, to the websites, like all this thing. And if there is enough interest for the type of size and the type of game you want to make, then you make it. And then you do like 10 or 20 of these in parallel at the same time, and you choose the best one. So it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, right, you're not even thinking about what game you want to make, it's just like what the market wants. And yeah, I'm trying to like choose a good middle between business and really like hobby there. I think it's important to maintain the passion.
I agree with you, and I'm following Chris Dukovsky's blog, How to Market Your Game, and he's
Mm-hmm.
very keen on horror games. Because looking at the numbers, horror games are doing very well on Steam, and both streamers and YouTubers seem to like them. So if you really want to maximize your chances of making like an impactful game, you should make a horror game. But I don't like horror games at all. Like I don't want to make a horror game. It is not a genre that I connect with in any way, shape, or form. And while I could technically make a
Mm-hmm.
horror game and it might be successful, it is not what I want to do. So I empathize with what you're saying. Like, where is the middle ground between the market and my artistic vision? And it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge figuring it out.